Welcome back and thank you for staying with KTN Prime. Now we want to dive into a conversation, as I had earlier mentioned. We want to talk about the 25th of June protest, anniversary protest actually. And they went from peaceful protests meant to commemorate the youth that were killed last year during the anti-finance bill protest, but they ended up being chaotic. What exactly is the take of our guest when it comes to this matter? The excess use of force by police. Let's not even talk about the looting, the goons, all that we want to discuss right now. And joining me for this particular discussion to my immediate right is Elijah Kandia-Rotok, Senior Human Rights Officer and Advocate at the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. Karibu sana again.
Thank you very much.
Next to him, we have Timothy Turunga, Youth Leader from Lamu County. Good evening and Karibu.
Thank you for having me.
And equally, we're expecting Jacinta Onyango, who is the mother to the late Kennedy Onyango, who was killed last year during the anti-finance bill protest. I understand she's on her way and she'll be arriving here shortly. But perhaps we can start this conversation as we wait for Jacinta. Coming to you, Elijah. I mean, police assured citizens that they will facilitate these protests and ensure that they are peaceful. Did they really do what they had promised to do? Did they keep their promise?
Thank you for having me. I think I should start by just honoring and saying that our thoughts and prayers are with the victims who've lost their lives, and also the families and of anyone who either suffered injury or loss of property and are reeling from the effects of the occurrences yesterday. In terms of the communication that was given out by the police, we take note that there were numerous groups who had registered their notices at various police stations,
yes,
indicating that they would participate in demonstrating, in gathering in various locations across the country to commemorate the youth who died during last year's demonstrations. And so there was also a commitment from the various police heads of police stations, and even the Inspector General himself had already given that directive that they will allow the demonstrations to proceed, save for and warned against individuals from accessing protected areas.
Yeah.
So when we woke up towards the morning of 25th, the first thing we saw that there were various barricades that were laid out at various points, especially within the city. Then there was a contrast. On one hand, we saw a coordination between the police and the protesters, especially incidences in Meru and Mombasa, where we saw a procession of demonstrators who were able even to submit petitions, and they were able to express themselves, despite some instances where there was a bit of disruption, because there were those also who had other intentions when they wanted to infiltrate or cause disruption during these protests. And we saw protests happening in 27 counties of our country. And there was that expression of either displeasure or for whichever issues and concerns that were emerging from the public, and there was that commemoration. However, we also witnessed instances where there was excessive use of force by security agencies that resulted to loss of life, that also resulted to grave injuries, gunshot wounds, and also individuals who are injured. On the other hand, also, there were police officers who are on the front line who also suffered injuries from violent attacks from some of the individuals who are purporting to protest. Okay. And we are condemning these violations. And from our information, we got about 8 within Nairobi area who are directly injured and were actually being treated in various hospitals within the city. So the extent to which these rights to assemble, demonstrate, picket and present petitions it should be facilitated by the state. But we are seeing acts that are moving towards the suppression of this right and the infiltration of individuals who want to take advantage of the situation to cause mayhem or to conduct violent robberies, damage property, and acts of looting. And our hearts goes to those business people who've made investments within various locations in the country and are now rearing from losses that are affecting them, and it would take a long time for them to return back to normalcy, and they deserve some form of justice for these losses that they have gotten so far.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Timothy, coming to you. I mean, initially when the Gen Z said they will commemorate this day, 25th, it was because last year we saw various youth, multiple number of youth die, 60 plus number if you look at the numbers that we have. But then here we are, peaceful protests led to more deaths. From where you sit, how the government acted then versus how the government acted now, is it really listening?
First and foremost, I'm quite disappointed with this regime.
Yeah, why?
Because why is our government afraid of its own children? Why is our government afraid of its own citizens? And why is our government afraid of its own shadow? Because there's no you can tell me, last year they killed 60. But then it's quite sarcastic that when you are going to commemorate the days of our fallen heroes, they end up killing more people. As of yesterday, it was 16, which is quite unfortunate because as a regime, it's supposed to protect the citizens. It's not supposed to be the vice versa, taking lives of the people who they're supposed to lead them. So today, as I was listening to the CS of Interior, I heard him say a certain comment that the international media are reporting things as they are. They're not respecting our country as they respect the outside nations. But then how can the international media respect or rather sugarcoat corruption? How can the international media sugarcoat police brutality? How can the international media sugarcoat extrajudicial killing? You see, these are the key things that took the Gen Zs to the streets as of yesterday, and they were demanding the president to go home because as of now, he has shown that he's not capable, or rather in good hands, or as a country, we're not in good hands as him as a president. Because the UDA regime is running our Kenya using the KANU tactics, where they depend on bribery, tokenism, and also suppression. But then they're forgetting that this is not 1993. The Gen Zs are more educated. The Gen Zs are more open. They understand what it entails and what the government should give us as the citizens, you see? Yeah. So this is an era where, as Gen Zs, they don't respect tokenism. They are not like tribal as the older regimes, older generations.
All right, coming back to you, Elijah, underhand tactics. We discussed this some time back, and we talked about the fact that we were seeing excessive, apart from police brutality, these goons working, who seem to be in cahoots with police officers. If you listen to majority of the youth that were there during the protest yesterday, they're saying the protests were peaceful until pockets of groups interfered in this. Once again, we're seeing the same thing happen. We saw it last week. We saw it the previous other time last year. Do you think perhaps there is a remedy to this?
Yes, the remedy is in the mode of operations from our security agencies and also the individuals who are participating in terms of coordinating of the protesters. Protesters are normally a group of individuals who come together and they know they have a purpose. That's why they communicate in advance. And so there is need for a collaboration between protesters and the police so that they are able to not only have good communication but also differentiate a genuine protester and those who are out to cause mayhem, to either rob others or do acts of violence as we witnessed. For example, the burning down of our court, the raiding of police stations, or and even attacking police officers. And so these acts require the entities to take stern action against such individuals.
Yeah.
And I must point out that when we see a group of individuals that seem coordinated and with an intent to cause violence, then it points to a concern where we are teetering with our security, and it becomes a serious national security that can affect and can bring us to the brink of the precipice. And I would, at this point, wish to call out especially the political leaders who've uttered words that have led to some actions or spewed information that led to now these sort of groupings, and also call out those individuals who are funding and coordinating this youth, that they should face the full force of the law, because you cannot take advantage of a right that has been put out and guaranteed by the Constitution to come and cause mayhem, so that it continues to breach this right and makes the realization of these rights become suppressed and does not facilitate it. And so when you see this mayhem, we should understand that our rights operate within the framework of the law. That at no point that one individual should imagine that because I can claim that I have this right, then I have the right to breach or abuse the rights of the other individual. And some of these are the concerns that might cause some action to be taken to sort of limit the extent to which some demonstrations partake. And there are guidelines which Kenya has ratified, and they are also set out within our laws and regulations, that there should be steps to separate these individuals so that the demonstrations are facilitated to continue. Unless there are instances where there is now breakdown of the law and there is lawlessness, that's when some of these demonstrations, for the purposes of preserving life and property, that there is that limitation. But you can also see that there is a deliberate move to try and suppress this right, either by sending individuals to cause mayhem so that these demonstrations are sort of brought to an end. But in doing so, you now limit that right that has already been guaranteed in the Constitution. And also our citizens need to be sensitized to know that this right comes with that responsibility, that you shouldn't be armed and you should be peaceful. So at any point that an individual is peaceful and unarmed, then these individuals should be allowed to express themselves and to express this displeasure and continue demonstrating without these restrictions or suppressions by either using excessive force or using live ammunition or using firearms or using even tear gas and water cannons that either disrupt an otherwise peaceful protest. Yes, thank
All right. You. I just want to welcome Jacinta Onyango. Karibu sana. She's the mother to the late Kennedy Onyango, who was killed last year during protests. Karibu, and sorry for your loss, and good evening.
Asante.
All right. So, Acha, let's talk about Jana. It was supposed to be a protest. You're going to place flowers in front of Parliament to honor those young lives that were lost last year. Did you get a chance?
Hapana.
Kwa nini?
Tulianza tu maombi hivi, tukaanza kutembea polepole tukiwa tumeshikana mkono, tukiwa na Maraga na wamama wenzangu. Hiyo kabla tu tupite hapo Nation Center, tuka tear gas. Magari za askari zimepita kama 2, ya 3 wakaturusha tear gas hapo hata ni kama walikuwa wanalenga Maraga. Mara 2 mara 3 tukapiga kona.
Mkarudi nyumbani ama
tukarudi?
mliendea na
Hapana,
mama?
hata tungepata chance ya kurudi nyumbani. Mimi na Maraga tuliingia hapo Nation Center na mwingine walisambaratika, kila mtu alikimbia kivyake, baadaye wakapatana wakaingia kwa java ingine hapo.
Okay. Acha tuongelee kutafuta haki. Ni changamoto gani umepitia ukijaribu kutafuta haki?
Si rahisi. Nimepitia changamoto sana. Nimelia, nimeongea kwa vyombo vya habari, nimetuma message, hakuna result nimepata. Na kwanza hata nimeenda mpaka Madaraka Day, nikafikiria sasa hapo wataniona na watakumbuka. Na kwa sababu nafanya hivyo juu alinipigia simu rais. Hiyo ndio maana nilikuwa najaribu. Ilikuwa date 4 mwezi wa 7 last year, nikisafirisha mwili. Karibu nifike kwa nyumba, karibu nifike kwa boma, nikastuka simu inaingia na ni namba sijui. Kushika akaniambia anaitwa Dennis Tumbi. Juu namba strange, lazima mtu ajitambulize. Akaniambia rais anataka kuniongelesha. Akaniambia kama mimi ndio mama Kennedy. Nikamwambia ni mimi. Akasema sawa, shika simu hivyo na usikate, rais anataka kukuongelesha. Nikaona basi ndio huyo rais anataka kunifikia. Juu nilimuona kwanza kwa news akisema atanitafuta. Sasa nikasema basi ndio huyo amenitafuta. Sasa kunipigia simu, kushika hiyo simu, nikashika kabisa, nikaona hachukui, nikakata, nikaona labda huyu mtu ananichezea juu hata sikuwaisikia kama kuna mtu anaitwa Dennis Tumbi. Sijui kazi yake ni nini. Nikakata. Nikifika kwa boma hivi kwangu sasa, nimekaa hivi na watu wamejaa kwa nyumba, na stuka tena anapika. Mam anapika. Mam, kwa nini umekata? Nikamwambia nimekata kwa sababu sioni mtu mwenye anaongea. Kaniambia shika hivyo usikate tena, ndio huyu anaongea. Mara dhata akaongea. Akaniambia mama Kennedy, habari yako? Nikamwambia sio mzuri. Akaniambia pole, nimeona na nimesikia. Nitahakikisha nimekuita na tukae chini tuongee na nikufanyie vile mimi mwenyewe kama msasi na yasafanyiwa. Pole sana na nimeona. Na Kennedy alikuwa mdogo. Nikasema sawa, asante. Mpaka saa hii.
Ushaijaribu kupiga tena hiyo namba? Nimejaribu
hadi kutuma message, mpaka kuongea voice message kwa WhatsApp yake. Naona status yake yeye ni Tumbi kweli. Lakini nimejaribu kutuma kila hadi juice nilituma hadi mapicha. Nikamwambia kama umenisahau ndio huyu mama ya huyu mtoto. Picha za kijanangu yote. Hakuna majibu.
Okay. Timothy will be getting back to you shortly, but just jump into that, because this process of delayed justice, where does she go next? Because there has to be a process that has been followed. Yes, she was contacted, but they did not, keep their word. So what does she do next, coming from a lawyer's perspective, of course?
Okay, that act in itself is an act where an individual out of their own free will seeks to communicate to the family of a victim.
Yeah.
And in doing so, of course, they raised the expectation of the family of the victim. So when you do not manage that expectation and then you leave it at that, then it goes against the principle of saying it's the do no harm principle, because you raise the expectation that you are going to do something and then eventually nothing is done. So you further create the sense of hopelessness, and then an office of that stature is at the apex of our country. And so their word should be taken as almost similar to, it should be taken without having doubt as to whether they would mean the truth or not.
Okay.
And so it is for them now on their own capacity. But in terms of them seeking remedy, there has been political commitments or addresses out there from that top, especially from the Honorable Raila, who's called out for compensation for the victims and their families.
It was part of the 10-point agreement.
Yes.
In the broad-based government.
Also, during the National Dialogue report, concerns around justice for the demonstrations that happened in 2023 still remain unaddressed. And when you look at our checkered history, going back to even 2007, whenever violations happen, politicians have come, shaken hands, and say, call for the settlement and reconciliation, but then they fail to look at what justice means. And so many victims and survivors, including individuals such as the families that represent these victims, have that element of hopelessness, but we still stand with them and we say, continue agitating, because once a violation has been done, then your right to recourse or redress does not end until you get either your day in court, or someone faces accountability, or you get some form of reparation for the losses that has happened to you. And so in terms of the current framework, we do have the Victim Protection Act, which focuses on compensation, especially in matters that are criminal in nature. But we also had a compensation framework under the Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission for the numerous historical injustices. Under this act, for instance, the Victim Protection Act creates a victim trust fund. And there is a board that is currently under the Office of the Attorney General that is to set up this fund so that people who can access the court can come and seek forms of reparation. And when court issue orders, then some of the orders can draw recourse either, or can draw resources from such funds. And so for the families of the victims, and that includes also people who've suffered loss for their property or have suffered injury, these individuals can come up with either a class action, and because the state has a responsibility and a duty and an obligation to protect life, to preserve property, and also to provide remedies for those individuals that have suffered violence or have suffered any form of violation, then the state would now compensate them once that legal process is done. But I would say at this point that the current framework is very limiting, and it is a lengthy process. We still have victims who've gotten actual judgments and are yet to receive their compensation. And so we are calling upon the state to ensure that there is an appropriate allocation of resources so that individuals who have won cases, especially against the state, can be able to receive their compensation.
Timothy, coming to you, I mean, if you look at the cases and compensation and the calls for justice, perhaps do you think there's goodwill from the state?
From where I sit, I doubt there is goodwill, because the president, during the prayer breakfast, he first apologized. And then what happens after you apologize? You mend fences, you rectify the mistakes that you did. But then as of now, it doesn't seem like he really meant with the apology, because the families have not been compensated. They continue killing more youths, of which this is an issue that needs to be dealt with, because we have a regime that has normalized extrajudicial killings, which should not be the case, where people go to protest as their right as prescribed by the Constitution, but then they end up using excessive force. But then this is unfortunate, because yesterday we saw where when people were looting, the goons that were sponsored by the government, when people were looting, the police were just passing there by their vehicles. They didn't bother. So that's a very concern, because where we're heading to where Haiti is, because when Haiti, it began as goons who were being used by the government. And then at some point it reached where the goons became too powerful for the government that they couldn't contain them. Now it became a revolution. So I foresee a scenario where our government, if we are not careful, it will take us to where Haiti is as of now.
We want to take a short break, but before we do, Mama, kuna mwanasiasa yote mwenye amekupigia kando na rais?
Hakuna.
Hakuna. Na uko na wakili? Uko na wakili mwenye anafuatilia swala hili?
Sijapata.
Kwa sasa haona?
Kwa sababu sijapata wakili ama sijatafuta, kwa sababu nilikuwa na ngoja hiyo hadi ya rais.
Okay.
Yes.
Sawa. We'll continue with this conversation shortly after the break.